Today's video, we're going to be mainly going over key points in the Book of Esther. Now, this is an interesting book because even though God, or God's name Yahweh, is not used at all in this book is still phenomenal because it ties back in from other places of scripture back into the key points and elements of this specific reading. This one's super interesting, and I'd love to go over some of the things that I found out about this and some of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading this, and how it really is important to just sometimes when stuff happens, just slow down and just have faith in God, have faith in God's sovereignty, control, and divine coordination of whatever situation that you're in. Now, before we get started talking about the specific Book of Esther, let me start by talking about the importance of your mindset as you go through situations, big or small. Sometimes, let's go ahead and start with the small things. So sometimes small things happen to you. Sometimes you spill milk. Sometimes your pet might vomit on the floor. Sometimes this or that. You could be waking up late for work, not being able to find your keys, And in those moments like that, it really is important to take a step back and realize that your mindset in this moment is going to determine a lot of things, because that doesn't change the fact that it is happening. Now, how you choose to react and how you choose to let yourself feel about it and the thoughts that you allow to come into your mind is going to dictate how you view the situation and how you let that situation control your day. And the specific things I said were small things, but you can also apply that to the larger things that might happen in your life as well. Let me tie this back to scripture really quickly. In Proverbs 4:23, it says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." Now, you may be more familiar with this verse in other translations, such as the NLT, in which it says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Now, that is one key point in scripture that you're able to refer back to if you're ever having a moment like that, just as a way to remember the importance of guarding your heart, because in that situation, that's basically what's going on. If you think about it, because you have the choice to view it as this horrible, awful thing that's happening and let it get to you or ruin your day, or you could try to view it in a different light and try to find the appreciation in the small things that happen. Like you could view it as God's protection possibly being in play, and kind of view it as more in a positive note. Like, oh man, what if me having to clean up this milk or clean up this mess just slightly change things just a slight bit to where now you avoid like a fatal car accident or something like that. Just so that's an extreme, but there's also other small things that you can realize, like, man, like, maybe your pet vomits on the floor. You could kind of take a second and be like, man, how blessed am I to have these pets and to be able to take care of them and clean up after them. And that's just kind of one of the parts of being blessed with pets, is that there is a certain portion of taking care of them and something like that. So try to keep stuff like that in mind. There's so many more examples that you can go into in regards to that. But anyway, I think that it's time to talk a little bit more about the Book of Esther and how all of these events being coordinated eventually led to a lot of protection and redemption. Now, let's go ahead and tie back a specific point in the Book of Esther that kind of gives a phenomenal example of how one of these small inconveniences for somebody actually ended up leading to this beautiful story of protection and redemption. So I got to give a little context first to the Book of Esther. So to give a little context of some of the key people that we're going to be talking about, we have King Ahasuerus. In some translations, you may know him as King Xerxes. We see that he promoted Haman and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. Now, as we could see, the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But then we see Mordecai here would not bow or pay homage. And then when we go to verse 5, it says, when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. Another piece of important context comes from chapter 2, verses 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when the inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Then in this section in chapter 5, we see Haman's plot against Mordecai. So Haman went out that day joyful with a glad heart, but when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand or tremble before him, he was filled with indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. And he sent and called for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Then Haman told them of his great riches, the multitude of his children, everything in which the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above officials and servants of the king. Moreover, Haman said, besides, Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her, along with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, so he had the gallows made. We also see this part of Haman's plan where it says, then Haman said to Ahasuerus, there's a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the king's treasuries. Now, we're going to continue reading this. Now, I'm not going to read the entire Book of Esther in this video. I encourage you to go out and read all of it yourself, and I encourage you to, of course, read the entire Bible, of course. I do want to bring attention to a few more points, because right here, this is going to tie into a little bit what I was talking about earlier. That night, the king could not sleep. Okay? Remember that. Just keep that in mind. And so one was commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers, who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? And the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. So the king said, who's in the outer court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, Haman is there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. Haman came in, and the king asked him, what shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Now, Haman thought in his heart, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? So it looks like Haman's thinking that he's going to get this blessing himself. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and a horse on which the king has ridden, which has a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that he may array the man whom the king delights to honor. Then parade him on horseback through the city square and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robe and the horse as you have suggested, and do so for Mordecai the Jew, who sits within the king's gate. Leave nothing undone of all that you have spoken. And then this essentially happened for Mordecai, not Haman, right? The key, now we do have to continue to go on a little further before tying everything back. So then when we go up to chapter 7, so the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and on the second day at the banquet of wine, and the king again said to Esther, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Up to half the kingdom? It shall be done. Then Queen Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. Had we been sold as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, although the enemy could never compensate for the king's loss. So King Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, who is he, and where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. We see that eventually in verse 9 and so forth, this leads to now Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said to the king, look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on the king's behalf, is standing at the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath subsided. So we saw how the king not being able to sleep led to the book of the records of the Chronicles to be brought and read to him, which led to him seeing Mordecai's good deed for the king, which eventually led to Mordecai being saved. We see in chapter 8, verse 11, the king permitted the Jews who were in every city to gather together and protect their lives, to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the forces of any people or province that would assault them. So we see that Haman's plan eventually backfired on him. But even before that, a lot of other things fell into place in this story in order for this to happen. Queen Vashti had to disobey the king, get replaced with Queen Esther. Not just becoming queen, but Esther also had to find favor in the sight of the king to become the queen, which eventually led to this and that and the other thing. All those things had to tie together in order to reach this end. The Book of Esther is just phenomenal. Once again, I highly recommend that you read this one if you haven't already, and maybe if you already have, it could be a good one to go back to. I certainly did notice a lot of new things on my second read through of it that I didn't realize on the first read through. Being able to tie it much more back to scripture and everything, you'll see a lot of parallels to other books in scripture, and we also see how Haman sowed all of this destruction that he ended up reaping for himself. If he saw Mordecai just not doing that, he could have just been like, okay, yeah, that's fine, that's cool, whatever, and just went on with his day. But his anger and how he chose to react to that situation led to his demise. And that's another example about how when something happens like that, something that you don't like, something that you don't like, something that gets you riled up, it's better just to take a step back, because Haman had a lot of good things going for himself. I mean, he was promoted and seated above all the princes, all this stuff. If he took a step back and said, I have this great position and this and that and the other thing, whatever it was. So Haman did have the choice to just view his blessings and be grateful for the people that were bowing and paying homage to him, and of his position and his authority and all of this stuff, But he chose to let this one thing get to him, and it led to his demise. Let me give you guys one more piece of advice from Scripture. We're going over to 2 Corinthians 10:5. Casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Now, if we take a look over at Romans 8:28, as it says, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So take all that into consideration the next time that something big or small happens that you might be starting to get a little upset over. Remember, guard your heart, take your thoughts captive. And those are the two really big things to remember. You don't want to let any kind of negative thought, feeling, emotion run rampant, because you don't want that emotion to turn into an action, like in Haman's case, where he was so furious with Mordecai that he set this horrible thing in motion that just ended up destroying him in the end. So take your thoughts captive, guard your heart, and if you want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments. And trust in God, have faith, have a good day, night, or evening, depending on what time it is for you. And yeah, take care. God bless.